It was never meant to stretch into 3 years. At first, it was just until Dad's back recovered, until Mom could pick up more housekeeping shifts, until life settled enough for me to take that offer in Denver. Or maybe move in with Danielle like we used to joke about over cold Thai takeout in my car. But weeks blurred into months, and months turned into years. I was still in the same twin bed I'd grown up in, working full-time, paying rent on a place that wasn't mine, and tiptoeing past Kendra's door like a visitor in my own home. Kendra was always focused on her future. Or so everyone said when she stayed out late or skipped helping with bills. She had potential. I guess I didn't. I was the dependable one. The one who'd manage if asked for more. So I kept saying yes. When Mom's hours got cut, I covered rent. When Dad had to skip work after physical therapy, I paid the heating bill through that brutal winter. I canceled a job interview to look after him after his second fall. I took extra projects at work just to keep up with credit card payments. I passed on vacations, skipped birthdays, stopped browsing for apartments entirely. Lately, the quiet at home had felt heavier. Not angry, just settled, like we'd all silently agreed that this was my role now. And the part of me that used to imagine having my own place had started whispering again. When the landlord announced he was selling the duplex, I didn't panic like Mom, flinch like Dad, or cry like Kendra. I just said, maybe it's time we bought something. They all stared. I can figure it out, I added. It's time. Mom clapped. Dad's eyes went glassy and Kendra hugged me. For the first time in years, I let myself believe this was something for me. A week later, I found it, 3 bedrooms, a quiet street, a porch swing already there. The process dragged through signatures, inspections, and phone calls during lunch breaks. I drained my savings, $10,000 gone in a single wire for the down payment, and took on a fixed mortgage in my name. When the realtor handed me the keys and said, "Congratulations, it's yours," I felt a deep, steady pride. Moving day was the good kind of chaos. Dad borrowed a friend's truck. Mom hauled kitchen boxes like she was decades younger. Even Kendra helped, unpacking her posters and curling iron like she was moving into a dorm. I didn't say much, just watched light fill the new rooms. I took the smallest bedroom, no closet, barely fit my bed, but it looked over the backyard. And for once, that was enough. A week later at work, I opened Facebook. There was Kendra, beaming on the porch, hand on the railing. The caption, "Thank you, Mom and Dad, for giving me my first house." I read it twice, coffee cooling in my hand. I called her. "Hey, what's up?" she answered brightly. "That post," I said. "The house." She laughed. "Cute, right?" "Kendra, what do you mean your first house?" A pause. "Well, Mom and Dad put the deed in my name. It just made more sense legally. Something about taxes. Don't be weird about it." My name was on the loan. My name was on every payment stub. And suddenly, I didn't own the thing I'd worked myself dry to get. I ended the call and stared at her smile under a caption that erased me completely. That night, I pulled out the manila folder with all the closing papers, flipping to the last page to see whose name should have been there. When I got home, I didn't set down my bag. Dad was watching TV. Mom was folding laundry. Kendra was nowhere to be seen. I stood in the living room and told them, "We need to talk." They looked up with puzzled expressions, like I'd interrupted something unimportant. Holding out my phone with a Facebook post still open, I asked, "Why is the house in Kendra's name?" Mom blinked, Dad rubbed his forehead, and neither spoke right away. Finally, Mom said, "It's not what you think." I asked her to explain. Dad added, "She's younger. It's about her security, her future. You're already doing fine." I gave a short, bitter laugh. "My feet? I've been paying your rent for 3 years." Mom's voice softened. "That's why. You've always stepped up. You're stable. Kendra still needs help." Dad's tone lowered, warning me not to turn it into a fight. "You bought this house for the family," he said. "No," I replied. "I bought it. I signed. I paid. And you handed it to her." They didn't deny it, and that cut deeper than any excuse. I left before they could say more, my heart pounding but my eyes dry. In the filing cabinet, I dug out the folder marked Legal Deed. The copies inside weren't mine, no originals, just notarized forms dated 3 weeks before closing, transferring future ownership to Kendra as a family gift. At the bottom was my lawyer's signature, someone I had trusted and paid. I sank against the wall, papers in my lap, realizing this wasn't an accident. They had planned it. They'd smiled through dinners, helped me unpack boxes, thanked me, all while quietly erasing me. By morning, I hadn't slept. I kept replaying their words. Her future. You're stable. 100 memories pieced together into a pattern I hadn't wanted to see. Aunt Jess's toast at Kendra's graduation about her being born to shine. Uncle Lou telling me I'd always land on my feet. Grandma whispering after I paid for Thanksgiving groceries. Of course she did. That's what Marin does. To them, I wasn't to be celebrated. I was the dependable one, the one to carry the load. Even Tyler, my ex, had once told me, "You never choose yourself." I'd brushed it off, but now it echoed. All my life, I thought selflessness was noble, that giving would eventually be returned. Instead, it taught everyone that I could be leaned on without limit. Kendra was treated as fragile. I was given responsibility after responsibility because they assumed I could handle it. When Dad was out of work, I stepped up. When Mom had surgery, I rearranged my schedule. Kendra never had to. Now the most permanent, valuable thing I had done, buying a house, had been signed away without hesitation. I wondered about my lawyer. Had he been misled with some family agreement story? Or had they all assumed I'd be too obedient to fight? I checked the clock. My meeting with a new attorney was in 2 hours. I gathered the documents, stood, and decided I was done holding on to something never meant to be mine. At the attorney's office, the air felt overly warm. Across the desk sat Elise, sharp suit and sharper eyes. She read each page slowly, methodically. When she finally looked up, I already knew what her words would confirm. She told me plainly. I'd signed the mortgage, so I was on the hook financially. But the deed? That was in my sister's name. Unless I could prove fraud or coercion, I had almost no legal path to reclaim the house. Even though I had paid for everything, she could easily claim it was a gift. And if my parents had helped set up the title transfer, and they weren't going to dispute it, I had even less ground. Still, she pointed out, if it was considered a gift, Kendra might have a tax problem, especially if the value crossed federal limits. That perked my attention. If she failed to file a gift tax return, there could be penalties. And if she was getting other benefits like student loan deferment or government aid, owning property could affect those too. When I got home, I started digging. I remembered filling out FAFSA forms for her years ago. She had over $20,000 in federal student loans, deferred for economic hardship. I checked her work history next. Her resume listed part-time work at a design agency, but a quick search showed she wasn't on their staff page. A contact in the same building told me she was freelance, off the books. Perfect. Then I checked property tax records. No gift declaration filed under her name for the year. They'd ignored the bureaucracy they thought they could game, and I realized the same rules could work against them. I made a list: IRS tip line, Department of Education, State Tax Board, and an anonymous income reporting portal. I wasn't destroying them. I was just letting the system notice what they'd left in plain sight. It began with a voicemail. Kendra's voice was tight with panic. Something from the IRS about gift tax. She asked me to call back. I didn't. Days later, my parents called, separately, then together, pleading for me to help her. Not once did they apologize or admit they were wrong. I ignored every message. This was my home now. My lease. My keys. My peace. 2 weeks later, she came to my door. Mascara smudged, hair pulled back, manila envelope in hand. She blurted about owing over $8,000 in taxes, losing her loan deferment, and being let go from her agency after an audit. She begged, saying she thought the house was for everyone and didn't realize what it would lead to. I reminded her that she'd claimed it publicly as her own. She admitted she hadn't thought it through. That's the problem, I said and shut the door. 3 days later, my mother called again, telling me Kendra was in over her head. I told her that she always was, and I was always the one pulling her out. But now I said, she was old enough to swim on her own, and I hung up. The next morning, a letter came for Kendra but landed in my mailbox. Another agency, Another fine. I sealed it in an envelope and left it on the porch. That night, I slept without clenching my jaw for the first time in years. By early spring, the house was gone. Bank repossession, unpaid taxes, defaulted loans. The official notice went up in March. I never drove by. I'd stopped thinking of it as mine long before the government took it. Kendra had moved into a shared apartment near the city, a one-bedroom somehow split between 2 roommates. While working a part-time retail job, she didn't really talk about. After that, she stopped calling. Maybe part of her thought I'd step in. I never did. My parents downsized to a small duplex farther from the city center, with faded blinds and baseboard heaters that clicked in the winter. They didn't tell me about the move. I only found out when the bank forwarded their change of address notice. By May, I'd made an offer on a small one-bedroom condo, second floor, outdated tiles, a creaky balcony, but warm sunlight in the morning and calm in the evenings. I paid for it entirely on my own. No one cried, no porch photos for Facebook, just me, the agent, and the notary signing papers. It was mine, bought without anyone's permission. A week after moving in, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. 5 pages from Kendra, apologies, explanations, maybe regret. She wrote that she hadn't understood what it meant to me, that she never meant to take anything away, that she wished she could undo it. I read it once, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a drawer I almost never opened. Some letters don't get replies, not out of hate, but because you've stopped needing to be understood. Last fall I met Mateo. He's gentle, steady. When I told him about my family, he didn't try to fix it. He just said, "That must have hurt." He asks before assuming, knows when silence is enough. I earn more than I need now, and for the first time, every dollar is mine. Every room I enter is mine. Every breath in the morning feels free, not borrowed. Each night, I come home to something I built, not as a gift, but as proof I was never asking for too much. 6 months later, the condo still holds the faint scent of cedar from the shelf I stained. I keep fresh flowers on the kitchen table, even if no one's visiting. Saturdays, I bake muffins I might not eat. Sundays, I sleep in without guilt. Mateo often visits with coffee, asking how my day was, not out of obligation but because he wants to know. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we just sit on the balcony with the radio playing, sharing quiet without expectations. My phone rings less. Mom calls every few weeks. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice sounds softer now, as if she's realized that silence isn't war. It's me stepping away from an old role. She hasn't apologized, but I think she understands. Kendra hasn't reached out again. Her letter stays in that drawer, unread. I've made new routines. Tuesday dinners with coworkers who ask nothing of me, hiking trips with people who don't know my last name, laughter without tension, questions without judgment. At work, I was promoted, not just for the designs I produced, but for my calm under pressure, for leading with steadiness. I accepted the praise, thinking about how long it took to see that quiet strength isn't the same as being everyone's anchor. One night, Mateo asked if I ever missed them. My family. I told him the truth. Sometimes, but not the version I had. I missed the version I hoped for. He didn't press, just held my hand. Tonight, while sorting old papers, I found a photo of the first house, the one I bought, the one they gave away. Kendra stood in the doorway, smiling too much. I flipped it over and wrote, "Not mine," then placed it in a box labeled "No longer needed." I turned off the lights, stood by the window, and whispered to myself, they were never my home. I was building someone else's shelter with my hands. And now, I've finally built one of my own, with walls that will never ask me to vanish inside them.